Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, April 5th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 148 days, the game against Michigan in 239 days. Back in January, Tony Gerdeman and I did a show talking about the eventful month that Ohio State football had, with players announcing they were coming, players announcing they were leaving, guys who were staying from not entering the NFL draft, and all that kind of fun stuff. The last week or so of Ohio State basketball has basically been the same thing in miniature. Obviously, a much smaller roster, so not quite the same scale of news, but there has been a flurry of news for the Buckeyes over the last week or so. Tony joins me again. We're going to try and sort through what that news means, where the Buckeyes are right now for Jake Diebler's first full season as the head coach, and much more. So, Tony, I guess let's start with the good news. And this is kind of this weird new era of college basketball where if you're leaving and entering the transfer portal, yeah, sure, you put a graphic together, you make a big announcement, sure. Now you've got guys putting together graphics and making big announcements, just yes, I will continue my student athlete role at this school, playing this sport for another year, something that you sort of used to assume was going to, like, of course you are. Why? What else would you do? But the Buckeyes have gotten some good news that several big-name players are coming back. Let's start with the point guard, Bruce Thornton. That was someone that, there had been some rumbles like, hey, maybe he's looking around, something like that. But he's back. That feels like a very good building block for Jake Diebler's first season.
Yeah, I think maybe if there's one person that you wanted to have back, needed to have back, it's your leader, it's your point guard. Getting Bruce Thornton back keeps them from having to start completely over at that position. And so you get one of the best point guards in the nation, in the Big Ten, somebody who going into their junior year as a sophomore, 2-year starter, should be at his absolute best. And when Bruce Thornton is at his best, he's very, very good. He's a guy that can bring teammates along with him. So I think this was a significant move for Jake Diebler. And in terms of the announcements, it's similar in a way to the way COVID forced the players coming back for their 5th year, using their COVID year, to say, hey, I'm coming back for my 6th year. And now it's not the players putting these things out necessarily. It's the collective. It's Ohio State. It's the foundation announcing the return of players, which I think is an interesting twist in this, where you can see the wheels turning behind the scenes in terms of why some of these decisions or what is maybe putting the players over the top in terms of coming back, or even in terms of not coming back.
Yeah, it does feel like there's been a very obvious shift in leverage between the players and the schools over the last few years, with the one-time transfer exception where you don't have to sit out a full year like you used to if you transferred, plus the transfer portal being open and there being a very easy way to transfer from one school to another. And then also NIL, just the leverage has changed. The power imbalance there, or balance there, has changed quite a bit. So yeah, I think you're seeing a lot of that sort of manifesting itself for a lot of teams right now all across the nation. It does feel kind of like this is going to be the new normal. And the Ohio State team has got another piece of good news with the return of Felix Okpara. They have, that he is the big man on this team. He put up 6 points, 6 boards, a couple blocks a game. He's really turned Tony into a really important piece for this team where, he's not putting up Zach Edey numbers, but in terms of, standing up to Zach Edey, he was a big part of why they were able to beat Purdue in the Schottenstein Center. And he feels like he's going to be a very important part of their team next year as well.
Yeah, he's a guy that continues to get better. He's always been pretty good defensively when he's not in foul trouble, but offensively, I think he's going to continue to get better. And takes me back to, 25 years ago now with Ken Johnson, who progressed from a 6'11" shot blocker as a true freshman to a pretty darn good scorer by the time he was a senior. So this is basically Ohio State securing their battery at the point guard and the center. So you've got the middle of the lineup there, and you build around them. But Okpara helps, obviously, defensively is a huge thing. He will be probably, I think, the number one shot blocker in the Big Ten next year with Zach Edey gone. But I also assume there's another 7'3" guy at Purdue waiting in the wings. So we'll see about that. I don't want to make any promises there, but Akbar is a guy that we have seen just continue to get better and better. So it will be interesting to see what he looks like as a junior as he continues to elevate his offensive game. We saw him try to incorporate the 3-point shot a little bit into his game this year. I don't know if they want to continue that or if they just, maybe cap it at the mid-range game.
Well, midway between the point guard, the 1, and the 5 at the center, you got 3 spots in the middle there. One of them we know now is going to be manned by Devin Royal. He also announced he was coming back. He's someone who felt like he sort of took on a bigger role as the season went along. Local product. That feels like another good addition, Tony, just to have someone else there who's kind of, you obviously we're going to get to some of the guys they lost in a minute and one of the guys they brought in. But this feels like someone who, a lot like Felix Akpara, probably going to see a progressively bigger role on this team as he moves through his career.
Yeah, the more we saw from Devin Royal, there's a little bit of EJ Liddell to him, where he's a little undersized as a power forward, not quite skilled enough with the ball on the perimeter to be a 3, but has tremendous court feel, knows where the basket is able to finish while still being like 6'10" or 6'6", 215, 220 pounds. Like, he is good around the basket. He's a smart basketball player. I think he averaged like 4.7 points per game this year. I would expect him to be a double-figure scorer next year, and we'll have some games in the 20s where defenses are having a really difficult time with him, just depending on how much Jake Diebler relies on him, how much they go to him in the post, and how many putbacks that he gets. I think he's a future 16 to 18 point scorer. I don't know that happens next year, but I think you'll see his game continue to develop. We saw him shoot some threes this year, didn't really make many, hardly any, but I still always find it positive when players are shooting them. That lets you know that they make them in practice, so they have the ability. It's when players never shoot threes, you're like, well, they clearly can't shoot them because they're not even attempting them. So even if they're not making them, Devin Royal didn't make them this year. The fact that he's shooting them tells you that he can make them and he will eventually make them. So his game will continue to get better, and that's it's a pretty good core. Those 3. The bigger question is what happens now around them.
Yeah, that is kind of the big open question. The one thing that the Buckeyes have already added, we're going to talk in a minute about 3 guys they've lost in the transfer portal. They have already made one addition in the transfer portal, and that is going to be a familiar name to Ohio State fans. It is Meechie Johnson. He is coming back to Ohio State. He started his career as a Buckeye, then transferred to South Carolina, and then now transferred back to the Buckeyes. And, he put up good numbers at South Carolina. It wasn't necessarily they weren't the most efficient numbers, but with one of the departures that we're going to be talking about in a minute, this feels like this is going to be an important addition in terms of having someone who can, a guard who can shoot the basketball from all over the court.
Yeah, be able to stretch a defense. And even though he's like a 33% shooter from 3 the last 2 years, you still have to respect him. You can't just leave him open. So he averaged 6 or 7 3-point attempts per game and made 2 of them basically on average the last 2 years. He is a guy that can score, but if you look at his game logs, I think one of the last games he had was like an 0 for 9 from the field. So that is also an issue. But I think he gives you the ability to play both point guard and shooting guard. I would expect him to be the 2 in the offense next year, and just gives Ohio State a guy that can stretch a defense. The thing that he'll need to do, I think, is maybe be more disciplined and how he does that. But also, we know Jake Diebler wants to push the ball, likes to push the ball. And so you've got another guy that can do that in Meechie and do it under control. That was one of the things that Roddy Gale struggled a little bit when he gets going quickly and fast and running with the ball, kind of loses his dribble a bit. If Meechie and Bruce Thornton can do that in a more consistent and efficient way, that will help them convert to Devin Royal, to Felix Akpara, to each other on those when they're pushing it and they're trying to get the tempo going.
All right, so those are the 4 returns. Well, I guess they're all returns. I was going to say returns or additions, but they're really all returns in one way or another. that we know about, the official announcements that are in, 3 guys have announced that they're headed to the transfer portal. And these are 3 guys who kind of are in different spots with the Buckeyes. You got Roddy Gale, who you were just talking about there a minute ago. He saw his minutes kind of contract a little bit when you went from Chris Holtmann to Jake Diebler towards the end of the season. Scotty Middleton, who was away from the team for a little while towards the end of the season with some personal stuff. And then Bowen Hardman, who really just didn't get on the floor a whole heck of a lot in his first year as a Buckeye. So those 3 guys, you're losing different guys in different points of their careers. But, Roddy Gale and Scotty Middleton especially, Gale was a major contributor to this year's team. Scotty Middleton was someone you looked at and thought, this guy is going to probably be a major contributor to next year's team. So, they're to varying degrees, those are 3 guys whose departures you're going to feel the impact of a little bit.
Yeah, and how do you replace each one of those guys? And they're all different. Bowen Hardman is just a sharpshooter, come in and shoot when he could. Defense wasn't really there. But who is that guy that can come in and be that catch and shoot guy? I don't know if there is one on this team just yet. Maybe somebody will develop into that. But the other 2 guys, Roddy Gale and Scotty Middleton, like to me, those are maybe the 2 guys with the most potential on this past year's team in terms of their ability. Scotty Middleton, 6'6", 6'7", what is a defensive effort guy, but also a very confident shooter. Could put the ball on the floor a little bit, but that was going to continue to be more of his game. So you could see the potential growing, and you can see what he can become. Roddy Gale, athletic as all get out. The shot goes and comes at times, and he didn't necessarily have it as much this season as he did the year before in the Big Ten tournament when he was really starting to connect and show what he could become. If that's what he is as a junior, then this is a pretty devastating loss. But overall, he can get to the basket. He has mid-range. He can pull up and shoot. And I don't know where you get that from this roster. I don't know where you get Scotty Middleton being a wing that can shoot. Roddy Gale could be a wing that can shoot. I don't think they have that right now that you can count on. Certainly not that you could count on to the level of Roddy Gale or Scotty Middleton and what they could be next year. So I think that's something that they're going to have to address in the portal, because right now they've got some good guards. They've got some good 4 and 5. They got some post guys. I don't see anybody on the wing necessarily that is that would concern an opposing coach at this point.
Well, and you mentioned trying to get guys through the portal, and part of that is how many guys they get through the portal to fill these various holes. We're going to get into some scholarship math in a minute, but there are 4 names we haven't said yet, guys who you would, in the olden days, have presumed, well, of course this guy's coming back. Now you're kind of wondering, well, we haven't heard anything that he's coming back or that he's leaving, so what does that mean? Does that mean they're all coming back? Does it mean they're all making up their minds? And we don't know the answers on those just yet. The transfer portal window is currently open until May 1st, so Payson Chapman, Evan Mahaffey, Kalen Etzler, and Austin Parks all have until May 1st to make a does he stay or does he go now decision. So what do you assume? When you haven't heard anything, are you assuming, yeah, these guys are all probably back? Are you assuming these guys are still deciding? How do you read into that when you're trying to make a plan, if you're Jake Diebler for next season?
I'm of the belief that Jake Diebler will know much more than anybody on the outside will. But who there of the names that you mentioned really has negotiating power at this point? And it's hilarious that we're talking about negotiating power and NIL and things like that in terms of college sports, but that's where we are now. You're always looking could they go somewhere else and get more money? Perhaps. And I think I've been telling people, don't ever assume somebody is coming back. It's probably safer to assume that nobody is coming back definitely safer to assume that nobody is coming back rather than everybody is coming back, But I have people in my DMs oh man, I can't believe this guy left. Now Roddy Gale is going too. It's don't assume anybody is coming back. This is college basketball now. This is the way it is. And this isn't necessarily entirely new, but it's pretty new. It's still, people are still getting used to it, but until people tell me that they're coming back, I'm not going to assume they are back. I'm not saying they're gone, but this is just the state of the game right now. And then you're saying, well, why should somebody who has played 2 minutes this year announce that they're returning? I don't know. They shouldn't have to. Like, we'll see them if they're still here, if there's no news on May 1st or May 2nd, when the portal window closes, then there's your answer, Fishbulb.
Well, let's get our fishes and our bulbs together and try to figure out how many scholarships the Buckeyes have potentially left for between now and next season to try and fill whatever the holes they end up having via the transfer portal. 2 guys coming in right now. We just ran through the list of guys who are returning or who are potentially returning. So, Tony, hopefully you do not run out of fingers on this one. How many scholarships will the Buckeyes potentially have as of right now to try and fill whatever holes they feel like they need to fill through the transfer portal?
Yeah, as of right now, I have them with 3 spots open, and there's a lot that you can do with that in the transfer portal. You can completely, you can change your lineup, or you can fill out your lineup. And I don't think Ohio State needs to change things. They definitely need to supplement some areas. I think they need some post guys, need a wing guy, maybe somebody that can do a 3-4 and 2 guys that can do a 4-5, something like that, or 2-3. I just think you need more on the wings. You need more in the paint unless you expect Austin Parks to be playing this coming year as a redshirt freshman. I don't know how much they expect that to happen. So again, some of this portal stuff is going to be what they've seen in practice. Like, oh, we definitely need help at this position because we're still a year away from this guy. Like Colin White, incoming freshman, plays small school basketball. I don't know that you can expect him to be somebody on the wing that contributes this year. Junie Mobley is an outstanding guard, but he's a smaller guard. So the wing to me is something that they're going to have to focus on. And I still wonder how they're going to marry Evan Mahaffey and the minutes for Devin Royal, because they kind of play the same position here and there. So who do you get that can complement and maybe work with those guys, and who's willing to do that? And knowing that, well, I'm coming in with 2 14-point scorers in Bruce Thornton and Meechie Johnson, another guy in Devin Royal who could be, I want to be a 20-point scorer. I can't do that here. Like Roddy Gale maybe can go score more somewhere else, and maybe that's why he went, along with some NIL reasons. So you got to go out there and see who's out there, but I still think you need some real players if this team is going to reach any kind of meaningful postseason next year.
Well, we will continue to keep an eye on this basketball program and whether they can add any meaningful players over this offseason. Jake Diebler's first offseason as the new head coach of Ohio State basketball, heading into a new era in this fall. He certainly gave people a little bit to be optimistic about with how things went after the dismissal of Chris Holtmann in mid-February. See if Jake Diebler can keep things moving on the right track during this upcoming season. We will also be keeping a close eye on the Ohio State football team as they head into the spring game just a week from Saturday. Plenty of stuff to talk about there as well. We will be back on football on tomorrow's show. Don't you worry. Plenty to talk about there, and plenty to talk about at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. We got our whole team of X's and O's gurus making you a smarter football fan, plus a really fun and active community on the Huddle Board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.